Hello, one and all, good afternoon. So today's topic is on again DVMS. All right. So hope you been learned a few things in a DVMS. Okay, if I'm not wrong. Okay. So and I'm recommended you to practice. Read some theoretical part on the DVMS. Okay, and this theoretical part will be used when it is comes to implementation part. So that's the reason each and every candidate I am recommended you to practice, just go to a concept, that's it. So I am going to show you the basic implementation, how this practically done in a real time application developers. Yes. So what is actually the objective of today's session is we will learn about relational data models. But before I am going to talk about today's session, and there is something has been pending from the yesterday's session, is it right? Yeah, probably. The yesterday we are being learned about the different rules which is invented by E.F. Codd. Have you read that? Yes, 100%. These are the rules which we have invented by E.F. Codd. He is a research person on the different RDBMS products, in which we have been talking about different rules, and in which we have completed almost 7 to 8 rules. Okay. So what is the first rule we have finished? We have finished a few rules. Okay, let me show you what are the rules we have finished from the yesterday's session. And the first rule is information rule. Yes. Okay, this rule we have discussed in yesterday's part. Alright. Second rule is about guaranteed access rule. This is also we have finished in yesterday's session. And third one is systematic treatment of null values. It is one of the most important rule in E.F. Codd rules. Okay. Out of there are 12 rules, in which third rule is one of the first priority you can give it. And the next rule we have given is active analog catalog. Nothing but you can say whenever online transactions are happening on a particular database, this rule will comes into a picture. That is something called it as active online catalog. And the next rule is comprehensive data sub-language rule, and this is what we have discussed in yesterday's session. Whenever we writing a particular queries on the databases, we need to follow a few databases languages. I am talking about DDL, I am talking about DML, I am talking about the DRL. All these particular languages will be used to communicate with the databases. Next rule is view and updating the rule. Means what? As a theoretically, you can tell that you can update the information, and also you need to be a very perfection in which systematic things also has to happen in practically. I mean to say that whenever the data has been updated from the theoretical end, right, nothing but your system is also in a capable, the system whatever you are going to design, that system is also in a capable to design the application in terminology of viewing, updating the information of a particular user. Mean to say that the data of a particular application or the data of a particular databases will be either a user information or else it could be a metadata, right. So as when you talk about theoretically, you can update it, as you can just tell in the oral. So that will be a very good understanding purpose, and also your system is also capable to update the information to your databases. This is the rule number 6, and the rule number 7 is high level insertion, updation and delete also be possible. Okay, I hope I have finished with the first 6 rules in yesterday's session. Now let me talk about insertion, update and delete rule. So what is we have to do in this particular example is, if a system is designed or database is designed by the specific database designer or else database designer or a developer, anything, for example, let me say that insertion in the sense as you going for any kind of registration pages, you may go for Facebook page, you may go for Gmail page, you may go for some other X page that consists of registration. Mean to say that it has to be an insert process has to be done. Whereas updating, for example, after login sometime or after few days, my system is asking me to update the password, update the username, update the email ID. Nothing but that comes under updation process. Whenever I don't want to use my account for the next and no longer, nothing but I just want to stop my application account here itself, then it comes with a delete operation, right. So, that delete operation comes with a seventh rule. What is this seventh rule will suggest you are that, for example, if you inserted one row into a database, it will accept, 2 rows accepted, 100 rows accepted, but they are supposed to not to give any message that after inserting 100 rows or after inserting 1000 rows or after inserting 10,000 rows, right. You saw system, your database management system product supposed to not to tell that the data cannot be inserted unless or until if the data is a duplicate data. Am I very clear? So, that is the reason I am telling you that whenever you design your system, whenever you design a database system, the system will accept the records maybe 100, maybe 1000, maybe 10,000, maybe it can be a 1 lakh also. All that records has to be accepted any time, any point of time by your databases. Okay. That is what I am trying to talk about in the seventh rule, right. The seventh rule of EF code will tell you that the database must support the high level insertion, updation as well as deletion. And the next one is this must not limited to a single row, right, and that is it must also supports union, intersection and minus operations to LD the set of data records. Please note it down, the seventh rule of EF code. All right. So, once you finish with the seventh rule, let me take you to the eighth rule of EF code. So, what is the eighth rule will tell you is, for example, the data is stored in a database must be independent of an application that access the database. All right. And the second point is telling you that any changes physical structure of database must not to have impact on how the data being accessed by external applications. What it mean to say that is, for example, your intention is to store the data in a database. All right. Right. So, now the database of a certain application not presented on the local machine where you accessing is. Nothing but you are accessing the Facebook application, you are accessing some Gmail application, you are accessing some X other application through the web, yes or no? Absolutely. So, what will happen is the data of that particular database will not presented the system what you are using, it will not be there. It will be presented some part of United States of America or some part of Australia, some part of Europe. But as an application can be accessed any part of the world, right? Means what? It is not restricting you to cannot be accessed from India. It cannot be accessed from United States of America. You can use an account from India. You can also use that account from United States of America. You can use some part of the world. That application has to be flexible. So, that will tell you that eighth rule of EF code, nothing but it has to be a data independent, physical data independence. And along with this, it also tell you that, for example, something modification is required on my database. Physically, I want to change it. For example, when I am design my database, I have around 11 columns in my table, right. So, tomorrow I have a requirement to increase that 11 count to 20. So, nothing but how many columns I need to add? I need to add 9 columns into my table, so that it becomes as 20. Such a way that if I am adding that to 20, it is supposed to not to have any impact of all already registered users. Right now, I have already registered into my Facebook, yes or no? Now, your Facebook adding a new features. Does it won't allows you to do it? Yes, it will allow you. But the thing is, your data is already presented, that will be as it is, and when you insert a new data, that will be added to the next level. Nothing but I have changed physically, I have changed something in my database, but that will not be affected on by the end user which is already using that particular website. That's the reason this one is called it as physical independence of a data. Please see that slide again. See that the data stored in a database must be an independent of the application that can access the database, first thing. And the second point is any changes in physical structure of a database must not to have any impact on how the data is processed by external applications. Please note it down if possible, because as all these rules will be a most important when it is comes to an interview point of view. Means what? In interview they may ask you to list out a few EF code rules. We have a 12 rules, right? Out of which they ask you to list out around 10 or 5 or 6, in which you have to give at least important rules as like a third rule, systematic treatment of null values, and the high level insertion updations, that is another important rule. And the next important rule is the data independence of a particular physical structure. Alright. So, this would be the 8th rule. Now, let me take you to the 9th rule of this. 9th rule is something called it as logical data independence. This is again one of the very important point. Now, let me tell you what is this important point is all about. The logical data in a database must be independent of its user's view. Alright. Second thing is any changes in logical data must not to affect on the applications who is using it. And the third one is, for an example, if the two tables are merged or splits into two different tables, there should be not impact or the changes of user application. This will be, or this is one of the most difficult rule to apply the data, right? So, now let me tell you once again what are the points which we have here. So, I am going to explain you one by one. First thing is the logical data in a database must be independent of its user's view. Mean to say that, for example, the data which is presented in your data, that is physical data. Yes or no? Physically that the data will be presented on some part of your server, some part of your database application server. But when you logically accessing, how do you logically access? With the help of programming. With the help of programming, you can make a logical inter. Means what? You can just write a program, it hits on the database and it comes with a result. Yes or no? That supposed to be independent. They're supposed to be independent, even though have any changes physically, that logically supposed not to have any impact. Am I very clear? Or let me take you to the second point on this. Any change in the logical data must not affect on the applications who is using it. Very clear, that is what I am trying to talk about from the last few minutes time. Mean to say that something has been changed either logically or else physically, doesn't matter. Yes or no? Either I am writing my program, either I have already have data in my database. In these two cases, anything is changed, rather it is physically, rather it is logically, your data which is used by the end user supposed to not to have any impact. What will happen is, if the data is impact on the user will get confused because he is habituated to using that application from longer time, right? So, that is the reason. Alright, the next very good example I am going to give you here, let me check you the slide over there. The slide which telling you that there are the two tables are merged or one of the splits data into two tables. Alright, what does it mean to say that? Okay, now let me show you when the simple thing. Alright, so now look at here on the screen once. So, you probably have two tables. Yes, for example, this is a table 1, alright, and followed by there is one more table in the database. There are two tables, alright. So, in these two tables, a user is basically the market is on the relational databases, right. Relational database in sense we can make a relation of these two, and a result of the relation what will happen is it will be merged as a single table. It will be merged as a single table, nothing but the data which comes from the both the tables will be again shows in a single tabular format. I mean to say that, for example, let me say that you have registered into a Facebook website, or you are registered into a Gmail website, or else you are registered into a Twitter website. The data which you have given, right now I am splitting into two things. As a database developer, what I am doing is I am splitting the data into two tables. What the first data what I am splitting is user information, and the second one is contact information, right. As a user, you are registering it, but you doesn't know what is I am doing on a back end. What I am doing in the back end is the data whatever you supplied to my website, I am trying to divide the data into two separate parts. The part one is user information like username, password, or all the different things, and the contact information like mobile number, address, or email ID that comes up. Now, as you logged into my website, and the data has to be shown only in one particular thing, right. When I am open my profile page, so you can just open your profile page of any website, you will find both the data in one place, right. Nothing but what I am trying to do as a logically what I am trying to do is I am trying to merge these two tables into a single table where the data is showing in a single table, right. When you are doing it, it's supposed to not to have any impact on the external user who is using your application or your website or whatever it is. Yes, that is what I am trying to talk about in this particular thing. Now, let me show you the slide again. If the two tables are merged, or else one table has been split into two different tables, maybe either one or one table has been split into two parts, that doesn't matter. There should be no impact or changes on the user application. User is supposed not to have any difficulty to using that application. This is one of the most important rule to be applied on every databases what you supposed to uses. Please note it down the points whatever it's going to show you on the screen. The rule number 9, it is data independence. All right, hope you finished. Now, let me take you to the next rule, rule number 10. So, what is the rule number 10 will tell you? The rule number 10 is telling you that a database must be independent of an application who is using it, which I have already discussed. And the second important point is all its integrity constraints can be independently modifying without the need of any changes in the application. Yes. Now, the last point is this rule makes a database independent of the front end application and its user interfaces. All right. Now, let me take you with in detail point on this. A database must be independent of application who is using it. That is what we have already discussed, right. So, we have discussed that if something has changed physically or something has been changed logically, they are supposed not to have any impact on the databases or else on the application. It has to run properly without having any problematic things. That is the first point. And the second point is integrity constraints can be applied independently if the modifications without modified the need to be any changes in your application. For example, I will tell you. For example, constraint. What it mean to say constraint is something where you can apply the different kind of conditions to a, sometimes you can apply to attributes, sometimes you can also apply to table also. Yes, conditions in the sense I probably specifically as I am a database developer or as I am a database designer, what I used to do is I will restrict a particular user, you are supposed to not to give this information. For example, username, you are supposed to not to pass any null value to it. If you are passing a null value, I won't accept it. If you pass a password as a null value, I won't accept it. Nothing but how the system is not accepting your null values. In terminology of not accepting the sense, I have to define a particular conditions on my databases so that the database application will not be affected. Am I very clear? So that's the reason if you do changes, if you do not changes, if you apply, if you not apply, it doesn't matter. That is the constraints. If you apply it or if you are not applying it, doesn't matter. But the major thing is that supposed to be not an impact between your end user or an interface what is a user is using on the front end application. All this has to be implemented in the designing of your database systems also. Now let me take you to the next point there. The rule makes the database independent of the front end application as well as the interfaces. Front end application in sense the application which is loading on your browsers, the application which is loading on your mobile devices, the application which is loading on your desktops. That is something called it as front end applications, right. So that will be makes independent from the one to the other one is. Am I very clear, guys? Right. Please note it down these points which is displaying on the screen right now. Once you clear on this, now let me take you to the another rule, that is rule number 11, distribution independence. Very, very important rule I can say, very, very important rule in terminology of your application development on databases. Alright, the end user must not be able to see the data is distributed over the various locations. Have you any time you are able to see where your data is storing in your Facebook application? Have you seen that? 100% not, because you are not in a position to see the data, because the application data will not be revealed by any person who is using it or any person who is developing. If you know this fact or not, database of Facebook will be handle almost 200 acres, 200 and plus acres. In that 200 and plus acres of data or in that location, the data will be organized, but that will not be revealed to any other person. It is the person who is only uses by the administrators of that website. The administrators of the website will able to see it. As a user, you can't able to see. Very, very important rule you can say. That is something called it as distribution independence. Now let me take you to the second point there. Users should always get impression that the data is located only at one site. See that maybe for example, I am a database developer, I have a data warehouse, nothing but where your data will be collected. I have a data warehouse, one place United States of America and the other place is something where Europe and the other place and Australia, the other place in India. So 4 different places I have organized my data. As a Facebook application, I have organized the data in 4 different places, right. But as a user, you will never know that where is exactly the data is located. As when you using that website, you can only feel that data is organized at only one place. Yes or no? That place will not be revealed, but logically the data is not located at one place. The data is distributed into 3 or different 4 parts. Sometimes it may be 10 parts, sometimes it may be 20 parts, but as an end user when using that website, you will not find any differences as normally. So that's the reason it is once again a distributed. Nothing. What is mean by distributed? Instead of storing your application data at one place, I can distribute the data into different places. I mean to say I can just sequentiate the data into different places. Yes, that would be the second point. Now let me talk about the third point now. The rule has been regarded as the foundation of distributed data system or distributed database system. Very, very important part. Very, very important part, that is something called distributed data system. Please guys, if you want to become our database developers, you have to know about something called distributed data systems for sure. Distributed database system, what it means to say? For example, instead of organizing the data at one place, we can split the data into different places. what will happen if I am distributing that data into different places? What will happen is, if one place it got short circuited, my entire data warehouse is got crashed, nothing but I do not have any scope to recover the data. But if you make your system as distributed system, what will happen is, one place your data got crashed, your data is no longer available, still you can get the data from other place where you have already stored. That is what it will tell you about distributed database systems. Very, very important thing. This will go to the next levels, that is something called it as Hadoop ecosystem. That will be again one of the very, very important part to distributing your data into different places, right. So, that is the reason the 11th point is about distributed independence. Let me take you the slide again. Distribution independence. The distribution independence will tell you the end user is not able to see the data of distributed over the different locations, and the user always impressed that the data is presented at only one location, and the rule that is being founded in the distributed database systems, or you can say data system also, anything is okay. Alright, are we clear on this? Please note it down the points which is displaying on your screen right now. Alright, so now let me talk about the other point, last point about your core rules. Alright, non-subversion rule. What is the mean of non-subversion rule is? If a system has an interface that provides access to low level records, then the interface must not to be able to subvert the system bypass security and integrity constraint. It is all about giving you the security for the data who is storing in your databases. Sometime, now let me tell you what is actually it is. For example, you are providing the data for the lower records, nothing but the data which is stored in a database which has been lower format. But as if your data is provided to a particular thing, then there are the chances that your data can be leaked out, nothing but there is the chances that your data is also stops. In that case also, you are supposed to be in a position to resolve those issues with the same thing, call it as integrity issues as well as constraint. What is this integrity issue? Let me take you to the next part, because integrity one of the specific lesson we supposed to discuss in our database management systems. In that time, I am going to discuss about what is this integrity problem and how this integrity problem can be solved with an examples of constraints. Yes, right. That is what the 12th rule of your database management system. Let me take you to the slide again. Non-subversion rule. Non-subversion rule, what is it is? If a system has an interface that provide an access to all low level records, then the interface must not to be able to subvert the system and the bypass security as well as integrity constraint, all these things, right. These are the 12 rules which is given by the research person on the databases management system, the person name called E.F. Cott. So, in interview you will have a directly question, can you tell me a few rules of E.F. Cott, like independence rule, logical independence, subversion, high level insertion, all these things you just need to keep in mind before you attending an interview on DBMSS. Alright. So, that is it on the rules part. Okay. So, you have any questions related to this on the rules part, you can just post a comment on the comment window which is given below, right. You can just post your doubt on the comment window. Then today we are going to talk about the another part, call it as a relational data model. Okay. So, actually that today's session is all about a relational data model. So, yesterday actually I was not being finished that rules part. So, I was discuss all the rules again. Now, actually today what I want to talk about is, I want to talk about the relational data model. What is this relational data model and what is this relational data model does contains, and how this relational data model will be used the impact. Yes. Now, let me talk about what is actually a relational model. Let me show you the slide again. The first point, relational data model is a primary data model which used widely around the world for the data storage and processing. And the next point is that this data model is simple and all its the properties, capabilities required to process the data with a storage efficiency. Alright. Now, let me talk clearly about relational data model. What is this relational data model is? Okay, I will tell you very good example for this. You can name it any website in the market which is used in the website, which you can use any website. You use Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, Yahoo or whatnot. All these applications by default background they will use some kind of relational data model, because it is a primary data model which is used by the around the people. What is the relational data model suggests you that? The relational data model suggests you that the data is not only stored in single place, the data can be split into multiple tables so that you can retrieve the data at a time with the help of its attributes. Am I very clear? Now, let me tell you the point again. Please listen. This point is all about the relational data model. The relational data model will tell you that the data which stores in the databases will not be located in a single table, will be located into multiple tables, so that whenever a particular person or particular developer has written a query, logical query, nothing but query in the sense logical, right? As you are just submitting the query logically, it will be reflect back to the result value. That will be splits into multiple tables. As you write the logical query there, then you can get the data in a single record or single result set. That is one of the very important part of your relational data model concept. Yes. So, that is the reason please keep in mind about the relational data model is a primary data model which is used by the different persons or different organizations in the world to process and store the information. Alright. Second point, this model is pretty simple and it also have all the properties, capabilities required to process the data with a storage capacity or storage efficiency. I mean to say that this data of a particular databases or relational databases will tell you that your data storage capacity. I mean to say, by default people will define that I can store somewhere around 1 TB data, alright, I can store some 10 TB data. So, that will be depends on the storage capacity or storage capability. What is this capacity and capability in the sense? The capacity it is 10 GB and how much it logically have storage, that is the capability of your application that comes with your data storage or storage efficiency. All this comes with the property of your storage efficiency. Now, let me talk about what are the concepts or let me show you the slide again. Concepts in relational model. What is the concepts are presented in the relational model? Do you have any idea? No problem. Okay, here I am going to explain you with what actually the big concepts in this relational data model. What are the concepts which involved here? The concepts are involved in a data model, relational data model. The concepts are involved as tables, tuples, relational instance, relation schema, relation key, attribute domain. All this comes under the properties, or you can call it as the concepts in relational model. Please note it down. All these are 6 points which is showing you on your screen. First thing is tables, tuple, relation instance, relation schema, relation key and attribute domain, right? Yes, hope you know that what is the mean of table is, right? Table is one of the logical entity or one of the physical entity which is presented on your database, which consists of rows and columns. Yes or no? Rows and columns. Columns always named as an attributes, rows always named as tuples, or you can also name it as a records also. right? Means what, you are being cleared with the 3 names, right? One is table, second one is attribute, mean to say that columns, and third one is rows. You can also call it as records, you can also call it as tuples. Tuples in the sense the row, record, which call it as tuples. Okay. Now let me tell you in detail about this. Okay. Now let me show you the slide again. Alright. Tables and tuples. In relational data model, relations are saved in a format of tables. The format stores the relation among the entities. A table has rows and columns which represents the records in columns, or records or tables, and the columns represents the attributes. Nothing but rows represents records, columns represents attributes. Alright. Next, what is the meaning of tuple here? A single row of a table which contains a single record. For that relation we usually call it as tuple. Please note it down the points which is displayed on your screen. Okay. Now let me give you a clear idea what is a tables and tuples. Table is a format which contains relations which stores you in the format of table. By default, table itself consists of some specific rows, nothing but horizontal lines. It consists of some specific vertical lines. We usually call it as an attributes. So that attributes are referred as the columns, rows will be represented as records. Now I mean to say that you need to have a specific name it methodology will be used in your databases. Nothing but I can't call it as horizontal lines, no. I can't call it as a vertical lines, no. You have to call that one as records, you have to call that lines of vertical, you have to call it as columns. Now what is the meaning of a tuple here? Tuple is a single table which has all its relations has been stored in a single row. I mean to say indirectly or directly, one row of a table we usually call it as a tuple. That row which has to contain some kind of relation between another entity in the sense, let us take a table. Let us take one more table, table 1 and the table 2. One record of table 1 will be interconnected with table 2 of some record, that we usually call it as tuple. Hope you clear on the topic of tables and tuples. Now let me show you the second point, relation instance and relation schema. What does it mean to say? Relation instance, a finite set of tuples in a relational database system represents relation instance. Relation instance do not have a duplicate tuples, very important thing. Alright. So when I am been talking about a relation instance, when I am talking about relation instance, you have not only a single record, you have a finite set of records. Finite in the sense there is no limit for this, there is no limit. As your application has been capable to store maybe 1 billion records also, that will be stored in a particular relational database management system format. But that tuples what you are designed, it's supposed to not to have duplications. Duplicate in the sense they're supposed not to have a same tuple has to be repeat for the multiple times. If it is repeat, there is nothing call it as relational database management system. Nothing but when you designing this, you have to make sure that relation instance is an instance which have a final set of records and the records will not be a duplicate records. Am I very clear? Yes. Let me talk about the second point now. Relation schema. A relation schema describes the relation name, a table name, an attribute name and their name, simple as that. Means what? When you making an instance of a particular tuple, this tuple consists of a few properties. I can call it as simple as that, I can call it as few parameters. The parameters like table name, the parameters like row name, the parameters like attributes name, all this comes under the relation schema part. Instance is different, schema is different. Schema will describe about it and instance will let you know what is actually the tuple is. Am I very clear, guys? Now let me show you the slide again. Note it down the points which is displaying on your screen. One is instance and followed by a schema. Alright, once you are done with this, now let me show you the another slide, that is something called it as relations key, and the second one is attribute domain. What is the meaning of relation key? Each row has one or more attributes known as relation key. Each row have one or more than one attribute known as a relation key which can identify that row in a relation table will be uniquely. Mean to say that I am going to show you with a simple example. Let me come with again relation key. What is this mean by relation keys? What is trying to talk about right now? I am trying to talk about each row has one or more attributes, nothing but let me imagine this is your table, right. In a table, what I am trying to talk about, each row in the sense, let me take a single record here. Let me take a single record. Is this single record have only one column? Sometimes it will not be. So that is the reason what I am trying to talk about, one or more attributes. Now let me show you, these are the attributes of the table. This is attribute 1, this would be attribute 2, this will be an attribute 3 or some 3 attributes. Now there is a possibility that this particular column can make a relation between some other table, yes or no. This can be I can say with a table 2, yes or no, there is chances. Then also have a chance that the second attribute of same table can have a chance that it can be relation with one more table, table 3, right. So now again this particular column, with this particular column what I can do is, I can also do relation with some more table. Now how many relations has been happened right now? For the simple tuple, for the similar record, how many values I have appeared here? Relation 1 means what? Will be a one relation, will be of second relation, will be of third relation. Sometime I can make the relation between second table, so that I will use this attribute 1. If I want to make a relation between table 3, I will use a second attribute, right. If I want to make table 4, I will use the attribute called table 3, yes or no. So these are the things which you need to remember when I am talking about multiple relation keys. Yeah, let me show you the slide again. So each row have one or more attributes known as one relation key, and each can be identified row is in a table by unique values has to be identified, nothing but that supposed not to have any duplication exist in that particular table is. Second one is attribute domain. Every attribute has some predefined value or a scope is known as attribute domain. Predefined scope, see that every attribute have some predefined scope. So for example, now let me say the same thing here. For example, on this attribute I have defined some attribute domain, call it as a integer domain. This one is string, alright, and this one is date. Alright, every attribute I am defining with some specific values here. One is integer, one is string, and the one is date. Now what will happen is, this attribute records will be all of integer only. right, and this one is string, nothing but all supposed to be a string. This would be a date, all supposed to be a date. So, nothing but every attribute will have its own scope, own value scope. So, that what will happen is whenever you are trying to read that, you have to follow the same architecture, how that particular attribute is defined, that is called attribute domain. So, it will be falling under which category? See that every attribute have some predefined value scope, that is something known it as attribute domain. Now, very clear guys, attribute key and attribute relation, or else I can call it as relation key and attribute domain, right. So, what we have been talking about? We have been talking about tables, tuples, relation keys as well as attribute keys. Now, let me take you to the next slide. What is the constraints? Very important thing we just need to learn about, right. What is this constraint is? Constraint is the part where you want to restrict a particular user supposed not to give some invalid information. Invalid information is the data which is sent by the user which is not perfect, that user you have to be restricted. You have to restrict that particular user to particular application. How do you restrict it? With the help of constraints concept. Yes. Now, let me show you what is that actually constraint is, right. Now, there is a screen, there must be have at least one minimal subset of attributes in the relation which identify the tuple uniquely, right. Second thing is the minimal subset of an attribute is called as key for the data which is referred. There are more than one minimal subsets, these are called it as candidate keys. Okay. So, all right. So, okay. So, to talk about this candidate key and constraints. All right. So, what I am going to do is I am going to stop the session here itself today, because if I am getting into constraint concept, it would be takes a lot of time. All right. So, that is the reason I am not going to talk about constraints today. So, by the time it is time up for the day. So, and I just want to revise what we have learned today is. And combination of yesterday's session and today's session, we have finished something called it as a EF chord rules. There are 12 rules will be there. I was given an explanation for all 12 rules. As what I am recommended to each and every candidate is, please try to look after all these 12 keywords or 12 rules, so that it will be helpful for you to attending an interviews on the databases. And the second thing is, today I have been talking about something called relational data model, in which I was been into the middle of it, something like tables, tuples, relations, all these things I am talking about, right. So, tomorrow session I am talking about constraints topic, how a particular user can be restricted, supposed not to give some unwanted information, so that if I am giving unwanted information, the data will becomes very large, so that it becomes very lengthy redundancy. The data will be very redundancy. So, I do not want to do that. For that, you have to be talking about constraints. All right. So, that is it for today's session. Thank you so much for listening to my class. Have a great day. By the way, I am Anil Kumar, trainer of APSSDC.